Hi, my name is Ellen Lee. I'm the Drinking Water Equity Advocate at NRDC, and I'm here today with Gina Ramirez, who is the Midwest Outreach Manager at NRDC and a resident of Chicago, to talk about the lead in drinking water issues in Chicago and the challenges that her and her community members are facing. Hi, Gina.
Hey, Ellen, I'm super excited to have this conversation today.
So let's start off with sort of you growing up and sort of your experiences with water. Why did your parents have to buy bottled water when you live in Chicago? And I thought Chicago has great water, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Chicago is the fresh coast. A lot of people like to call it that. We live right by Lake Michigan. I grew up recreating at the beautiful beaches here on the south side of Chicago. But my house is really old, over 100 years old, and my parents never trusted our pipe system. They knew that we had lead service lines. And so I remember from like age 5, my bottled water started becoming like more accessible at stores, and my parents buying cases of water and my dad saying like, don't drink the water from the tap. Like, I don't want you to get sick. And so they would make their coffee in the morning with bottled water. I remember them getting extra cases when my mom would make caldo, soup. So it just really became the norm. And like throughout high school, I remember bringing like a bottle of water to class and seeing my classmates also doing that. And then on trips to the grocery store, almost all the time I would see cases of water in my community members' carts.
So what's the biggest concern with Chicago's lead pipes and drinking water?
So, just like anecdotally growing up, I kind of knew that like lead service lines were an issue, but it wasn't until like I became a mom and a community activist and working at NRDC, like I realized how big the issue is that Chicago has the most lead service lines in the United States, which is really scary because this is like the third largest city. There's tons of children growing up here, and lead can cause irreparable damage, especially to like the growing minds of children. Like you look at the examples of Flint, Michigan, and then you hear about even like lead paint and exposure to children. And so, as I became more of an activist, because I live, on the south side of Chicago, which is dominated by industry, I'm not only concerned about the toxic air that I breathe in day in and day out. When I seek refuge in my home, I can't even put a glass under the tap and give it to my son because that's also toxic. So it's just like way too much going on. And so like the more that I'm learning about this lead service line issue, the more I realize like this is such a huge problem. We have to treat this like the public health crisis that it is. And this should be a top priority for the city of Chicago to replace these lead service lines. It's like a one and done thing. Like once, sure, it's a lot of money, but like once you replace it, like you can literally like as a parent breathe a sigh of relief that like your child is not exposed to something that can cause like this neurological damage. So yeah, I was really excited when this new mayor, Lori Lightfoot, came into the office and was making all of these promises. But over the past few years, I've been really disappointed in her lack of urgency in this really urgent crisis that's going on.
So I know Chicago has launched a few programs to get lead service lines out of the ground. Could you share a little bit more about your experiences with those and maybe your community members' experiences with those lead service line replacement programs?
Yeah, so my mom was super excited when she found out that there was some lead service line replacement programs happening in Chicago. I grew up low income and my parents are still very much low income. They're retired, my mom is on disability. So they definitely have a fixed income, and my nephew who's 13 lives with them along with my sister. So my mom was like, oh, cool. Like there's still a child in my home. There's an opportunity for him to, be able to drink water from the tap, and it will save money for us and put more money in our pocket from buying bottled water if we could qualify for this program. So there's like the equity lead service line replacement program that my mom has been unsuccessful in trying to get her lead service line removed. It's been about a 2-year battle that she has had, just because the city's made it really, really hard. The application process wants like countless documents, like utility bills, like the deed to her house. They wanted my nephew's report card during the pandemic, which he was being homeschooled at the time. So that's something she couldn't produce, which delayed the process. They also wanted a valid ID for like every resident in the home. And so because of the pandemic, my mom's license expired. And although in the state of Illinois, there was a moratorium on expired licenses because they knew a lot of the facilities were closed. So like if you were driving, got pulled over with an expired license, they'd let you go. It was considered valid. But for this lead service line replacement program, that wasn't the case. So we had to like drive her down to the city, Secretary of State. She can barely walk and she, is just so determined to, create a healthier living condition for herself and for my nephew that she was willing to go get a valid license. So hopefully, like the city, I think, has heard a lot of our complaints, like how this isn't an equitable process, this application process. And so they've eliminated a lot of these like tedious documents needed for this application. And they're actually like advertising for it. There wasn't like a lot of outreach. So a lot of folks didn't even know that this program existed. And so, just kind of like a lot of things in Chicago, you have to kind of like pound the city to do the right thing in order for some steps to go in the right direction. But, at the same time in 2020, the mayor promised, I don't know, probably like 200 lead service lines replaced or 600. And there's only been 74 replaced. It's 2022. That is just completely unacceptable when we live in a city that's, world class, that's beautiful, that, is taking water from this pure water source, Lake Michigan. Why are we, thinking it's acceptable that this water is going through this lead straw? So, the communities, I think, are realizing this. They know that there's funding in place. They just want the political will to be there. And so the communities, again, are trying to hold city officials, Chicago Department of Public Health, the water department, and the mayor accountable because, the money is there. People want this. This is a need. This is a health issue. So we just need to make this happen. So I'm always hopeful. You have to be hopeful in this line of work, which is being an environmental justice advocate. But I will definitely talk to whoever about this issue because it's so important. Chicago can do better.
So the bipartisan infrastructure law is a once in a generation opportunity to get lead out of our drinking water, which allocates up to $15 billion for lead service line removal across the nation. And Illinois is slated to receive $106 million in 2022. What are some things that Chicago can do to make sure that disadvantaged communities and communities of color are able to access these funds to get lead out of their drinking water?
I think the city needs to be a strong advocate for these dollars and make sure that that funding goes to low income communities of color first, who bear the hardest brunt of pollution burdens. This is also a job opportunity. So, we desperately need jobs, especially after the pandemic. So this is just like a win-win for everyone. We're, increasing the livelihood of folks. We're protecting the health of children. We're creating jobs. We're, building up infrastructure in the city that is weakened. So I just don't understand why there is no political will. And so you know, like we need to not only press the city on this issue, but also the state, because you know, we're all in beautiful Illinois here, a Democratic state. So we just need to fix this. I just don't even understand like why I'm even talking about this. Like this just seems so easy and clear cut. That like this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, this funding, and this is like a once in a lifetime. This is a one and done to replace these lead service lines. Like we won't ever have to think about this again. It's not like flooding, which you are going to have to think about because of climate change, or other issues, like urban planning with like, you know, green new industry, how to realize that in environmental justice communities. This is just like, let's get these lead service lines out of the ground, and we have the funding to do it. So again, it's just about like educating and socializing this to folks. I think it's just not talked about enough. I think that the mayor is just kind of like turning her back on this situation because, you know, like she's coming out with Chicago, which is a complete slap in the face. That, you know, there was this public relations campaign that she came out with this summer, playing on the fact that Chicago does have this natural gem, Lake Michigan, which is a beautiful pure water source. And so she's canning Lake Michigan water, putting $150,000 into this public relations campaign. And how many lead service lines could that have replaced on the south side of Chicago instead? So just like her neglect of Black and brown communities after a global pandemic is just abysmal. And you know, she needs to do better.
And is lead contaminated drinking water a problem that exists in every major city? Should everyone be concerned about this?
Yes. You know, Chicago does have the most lead service lines, but this was the norm, you know, for decades. And so I think Chicago has a real opportunity to set a standard, a gold standard, for other cities, just like, you know, we need to set precedents with cumulative impacts. New Jersey's doing it. Chicago needs to do it. You know, I think we need to set an example so that other cities can take the lead, because this isn't the only water contaminant issue. You know, there's PFAS, there's other issues going on, but this one's can be resolved. You know, like all you need to do is replace the lead pipe. So it doesn't seem that difficult, and it's very attainable.
Thank you, Gina. We really appreciate all your work and advocacy for your community in Chicago.
Thank you.